Are you looking to grow revenues, increase profitability, or obtain financing? If so, you came to the right place.
Running a business is all about leadership. How do you become a better leader? Learn from the successful entrepreneurs and business owners how to lead your organization more effectively. That's why we created Leadership Live at 8:05, Talking Small Business, to help you succeed with your host, Andrew Frazier, Business Growth Pro and CFO and founder of the Small Business Pro University. Every Tuesday evening at 8 p.m. Eastern, we're joined by experienced entrepreneurs and business owners who share their secrets to success via live stream. Also, every Friday morning, we release a new podcast episode. Either way, you will learn about developing your business leadership skills from our roster of highly performing guest experts. Leadership Live is one of the many valuable resources provided through the Small Business Pro University, empowering business owners to learn, profit, and grow. Find out more at sbpro.u.com.
All right. Good evening, everybody, and welcome back to Leadership Live at 8:05. Of course, I'm your host, Andrew Frazier, and excited to be back with you once again on Tuesday evening. As you know, being a business owner, there's so many things that you need to know that you can't possibly know them all. So it's so important to continually your learning and your development, especially because your business can't go any further than you're prepared to take it. So it's important to develop yourself as a leader. So that's why we created Leadership Live at 8:05 to help you, one, increase your business knowledge and expertise, but also learn how to lead your organization more effective. That's why we have great guests who have experience and understand small business and some of the nuances of that and what it takes to be successful. So once again, I've got a great guest tonight, John Ursin. We're going to talk about a topic that is very important to business owners. A lot of times we forget about this until we get into trouble, but it's important to be proactive. So we're going to talk about the legal game plan for growth and what business owners need to know at every stage of growth. It's very important to, like everything else in business, as you grow, as you move forward, you're going to need more sophistication in terms of your legal, in terms of your finance, in terms of your marketing, in terms of your operations. So it's always evolving and you have to always move forward. So really excited to have John Ursin join us. He's leads a law firm here in New Jersey and has worked extensively with small and medium-sized businesses. So let me invite him on. Hey, John, how you doing tonight?
Good evening, Andrew. How are you?
Excellent. So thanks for taking time out of your busy schedule to join us this evening. I see you're still in the office, so
not unusual. Yes.
Probably not uncommon for attorneys.
Got to put in the hours.
Yep, and I'm sure all the accountants are there in their offices tonight as well.
Yeah, they're not going home this weekend.
Yeah. This is their big weekend. So I'm glad that you could join us. Definitely have a lot of experience. We've talked some about your background and sort of what you're doing, but if you could take a few minutes, just share your journey with the audience, how you got to where you are and where you are right now.
Well, I'm sure, Andrew, just like probably many of your audience, my path wasn't a straight line. My path started, my education was in science. I have a biochemistry major. I decided not to continue in science. And what did I do? The first thing I did is went to one of my advisors, and the advisor said, you're on the debate team, you're good on your feet, you're a good communicator, why don't you go to law school? So first piece of good advice from an advisor and first example is to trust the people around you to give you good advice. And certainly I went to law school, and I've come up through smaller law firms. When I was younger, I certainly did more of a general practice, all different types of law, and a lot of litigation. And that really helped me develop a very broad background that serves me well, just like probably many of your audience. When you're advancing in a business, it's good to have a broad background. But what I really, halfway through my career, I really found that I appreciated most being associated with businesses, helping the positive side of the law, helping businesses avoid risk, helping them thrive, helping them get to the next stage, helping them become more sophisticated. And that's really what I do these days. My business approach has really allowed me to become an outside general counsel to companies, small and medium sized, that don't have their own legal staff, that use external legal staff. And I become like the general practitioner doctor, or like the quarterback. I field all the issues from the businesses, and then I work them with our team here at Schenck Price. And it's also interesting because my interest in business in general has led me to become the managing partner at Schenck Price. And we are really a medium-sized business. We have 90 plus attorneys. We were founded in 1912, one of the oldest law firms in the state of New Jersey, about 160 employees in a number of locations. So my interest in business has led me to running this business, and so it's a dual role, and I'm enjoying it. So I'm happy to be here and happy to share whatever knowledge I can share with your audience.
Okay, excellent. So definitely, going to different law firms, you get a lot of different perspective, I guess, as well, because every firm has a different culture and a different way that they approach attorneys and clients and their clients. So having wide perspective like that will be helpful. So one of the key things I always like to do to start out is sort of define what we're talking about, because many times people have different definitions or understandings of different words. So when you talk about legal, lawyer, small business representation, what does that mean? How should people be viewing what that is?
Yeah, so I think in the best case scenario, it means many things combined into one. The analogy I make all the time is a small business entrepreneur, a growing business into a medium-sized business. They need a consultant that can advise them on legal issues, much in the same way that you would have a general practice doctor. Who's your regular doctor that you go to for the things that you need, for the yearly checkup, for when there's a problem, etc. And then from time to time, you have to go see a specialist, right? And it's the same thing in law. You should be connected to a lawyer who can advise you on the big picture things, how to be healthy, how to grow, how to avoid risk. And then as your business grows and gets more sophisticated, that person can guide you through those steps or connect you with specialists as you need. And that's really my role, and that really is it's a specialty of our firm. Because we've been around for more than 100 years here in northern Jersey, we tend to be very community-based, very networked, and we really we're involved with businesses every day, from startups and very small businesses all the way up to businesses that have grown to be pretty good size at this point.
Excellent. So so definitely look forward to sort of digging in and unpacking that further. But before we do that, we do the show through the Small Business Pro University. So I got a short video about what the Small Business Pro University is, so you can learn a little bit about what we do and some of our additional initiatives that help entrepreneurs and business owners. So right after that, I'll be back with John talking small business. Many small businesses experience low or no revenue growth, and the owners are not making enough money. I founded Small Business Pro University to help you break that cycle. by empowering you with greater knowledge and enhanced skills to lead your organization more effectively. Over the past 15 years, I've collaborated with organizations like the Small Business Development Center, Rising Tide Capital, Empower the Village, NJMEP, Rutgers University, and SCORE to work one-on-one with over 1,000 business owners and teach tens of thousands of people about business. My experience includes serving as a naval officer, managing businesses, graduating from MIT, earning an MBA from NYU, and achieving the CFA designation, which has prepared me to accomplish my mission of helping 1,008,000 business owners to sell more, maximize profit, and finance growth by 2028. My vision is to create the ultimate business ecosystem for entrepreneurs. Small Business Pro University empowers entrepreneurs like you to run their businesses more professionally and create sustainable enterprises. We employ my proven proprietary Masterpreneur Playbook framework to guide your journey along the Masterpreneur path and facilitate your Masterpreneur evolution to work on your business and scale faster and easier. Small Business Pro University provides access to valuable resources, partnerships, and relationships that will help you to sell more, maximize profit, and finance growth. Our Masterpreneur initiatives include the Small Business Pro Network, 100+ expert-led multimedia courses, intensive training workshops, Spanish language training, Leadership Live at 8:05 live stream and podcast, in-person Power Breakfast events, and advisory coaching, consulting, and training services. Okay. All right. Well, welcome back. I'm here with John Ursin, and we're talking small business. Our topic tonight is your full game plan for growth. What business owners need to do at every stage. And, many of you are probably familiar, but I'll just reiterate it. At Small Business Pro University, we created what we call the Masterpreneur Journey. And that outlines the 5 steps going from startup to scaling a business. So we're going to talk about what type of legal support that you will most likely need at each stage or step of the path from startup to scaling. As you know, we've got the Masterpreneur path, working on the concept of your business, working in your business, working on your business, on the future of your business, and scaling your business. So we're going to start with step 1, really working on the concept of your business. So, John, if you're working with someone who's getting ready to start a business or who has just started a business, maybe just started making sales, what are some of the things that they should be thinking about in terms of legal support and potential needs for their business?
Yeah, so in the beginning, when you're working on the concept, when I really spent some time with your 5 steps, I really thought that first step, working on the concept of the business, was a time to really be reading about structures, tax issues, risk management, all the things that you need as a general background in the business. And you need to start thinking about how you're going to structure your business, where the business is going to be located, and who's going to do it. But a lot of that can be done, somewhat independently, and then you begin to have relationships with important consultants, including on the legal side.
Excellent. So really getting started, and it's a great point that you really want to be preparing for things at that stage. This is a time that you have to plan. Once your business gets started, it's like drinking from a fire hose. So it's really hard to step back and think about things and plan and prepare. So,
Andrew, that's why I thought your 5 steps really, I think it's very insightful, because you're pointing out the fact that you need to be prepared. And working on the concept of the business, to me, is a good place to get a broader understanding of business terms, of legal issues, risk, etc. And then your step two, the working in the business, you get to observe those things, and then you really get to, with your own eyes, start to figure out what the issues are. You know, how you deal with employees, what the risk factors are, how you deal with vendors, you know, what your location, you know, means. In that stage, I think you get connected to advisors, and then as you build forward, you know, you're building your relationship with your advisors.
Definitely, definitely. So now, a lot of times when people are starting, they're trying to figure out, what type of entity they should have, how to set it up. I know that there's different ways to get that done, whether it's, through a lawyer, through an accountant, through organizations like Small Business Development Center. But what should people be thinking about when doing that? And, when do you need an attorney versus when's it better to have an attorney versus an accountant versus a, business support organization? What should people be thinking about when they're trying to do that?
Yeah, I think this is probably as a result of what I do every day, but I do think that the lawyer ends up being a point person for you. So obviously, these days, you can certainly use AI or one of the automated systems on the internet, and you could go pick a business structure and you can get a business formed. It's not that difficult. But the reason that I think at that point that your first point of contact should be with a lawyer is to begin the planning process, but also to begin the relationship building process, because it's not just what the lawyer is going to tell you or what the product that the lawyer is going to give you as far as structure or documents for your business. You're building a relationship with somebody who should be very important in your business going forward, and should really, in my view, be the point person with respect to your team as you go forward, that we'll talk more about in a moment. But one of the things, it's a little joke that we have. We say that people, when they start their business, they either don't plan at all, which isn't great, or they only plan for failing. And so a lot of people come to us when they're starting a business, and it's a funny thing for me to say they plan for failing, but what I mean by that is they come and they're very concerned about the bad things that could happen. They're very concerned about, defaulting on a lease, defaulting on financing, having the business not be a success. And so almost always when people come to talk about a new business, they're really talking about all the things that could go wrong. And we try and get them to also plan for success, because success requires structure, and success has a roadmap. And we want them to plan for the what ifs and the bad things that could happen, but we really want them to plan for the success and the roadmap going forward, because it's going to lay the groundwork for good business development going forward.
Excellent, excellent. So, one of the biggest pitfalls for many people, and I've fallen into it myself as well, even though we had an attorney, was when you do partnerships. Mm-hmm. Because, it seems simple in the beginning, but, it can turn challenging very easily. What are some best practices around doing a partnership?
So I think what I said a moment ago applies even more once you take your role as the center of the business, and now you bring in one partner or two partners. So people, again, think about what's going to happen if the business fails. How are we going to part the ways, right? But you need to start to build a structure that will account for all of the legs of the flow chart. In our business, we talk about the 5 Ds quite a bit. We talk about death, disability, divorce, disagreement, and distress. And you need a structure very early on that deals with all of those issues, because if they take you by surprise, it's a big problem. And in each case, some of them are more obvious than others. But what happens if you take on a partner and your partner dies? That's more of a financial and control issue. Although people don't realize that if somebody owns 50% of the stock or is a 50% member of an LLC, it could be that the person's spouse or the person's heirs now enter your business, which was not your plan. And as we go through each of the 5Ds, we try and plan a structure through documents that will account for those situations so that people have expectations about what could happen at each different stage when things go wrong. And then, as I said, which was a little bit of a prelude, we also try and walk them through all the good things that could happen and how the structure that we're putting in place or the documents that we're putting in place will allow them to grow through maybe more partners, maybe more financing, maybe more locations, maybe more products, all the good things that can happen in business. But it really is a matter of starting somewhere, creating a structure, and then through documents, planning the various paths as to what could happen.
Excellent. So definitely, we appreciate everybody tuning in. Thanks for your comments. Keep them coming. We've got a couple questions in there as well, so we're gonna pivot to one of those. But welcome. Glad to see Gerard. Definitely Marcella. Always great to see you here as well. And if you're checking in, let us know where you are. We get people from all over the country, all over the world. Let us know. Hey, Darren in Baltimore, Maryland. So yeah, definitely. So let's take a look. We're going to go back to a question, but I want to go into further detail on it. So we got a question for Gerard. How do you decide which business structure is right for your company? But I want to change it slightly. Just for something I want to know more about as well is, you've got many people, the choice is an LLC and an S Corp for many people. What's the difference and why would you do one versus the other?
Sure. So because I've been practicing more than 30 years, I was certainly practicing before we had LLCs. So back then, you could only be a C Corp or you could be an S Corp. And an S Corp, was a pass-through entity so that the finances of the corporation flowed through the business to your individual tax return. And so we ended up with a situation where many people chose S Corp or they chose partnerships. And that was the choice perhaps 20 or 25 years ago. But partnerships were difficult because partnerships are not filed. Partnerships don't have a certain formality or structure. And the partnership is only as good as a partnership agreement, which often was on the back of a napkin or a very short partnership agreement, but rarely sufficient to create the structure that we were looking for. So the LLC became the hybrid between the partnership and the S Corp. And the reality is they both function very much in the same way. They both are generally pass-through entities so that the finances of the business pass through to people's individual tax returns. And the primary difference is when we talk to people about S Corps or LLCs, we certainly want to know whether they're going to own real estate because the LLCs have maintained a partnership benefit that you have accelerated depreciation on partnership rates. So you can depreciate real estate that your business uses faster in an LLC than you can in an S Corp. And I find that these days the presumption is that people like the way LLCs function more. But sometimes we have people, because of the number of people who are going to be in the business, or the distinction that you can make between stockholders in an S Corp. And S Corps have the typical thing that people are expecting: presidents, vice presidents, treasurers, secretaries, whereas LLCs have managing members and then members. And so sometimes we find that people want the structure with more shareholders and sort of older style shareholder rights in a S corp. But typically, the decision comes down to how the business is going to operate and whether or not the LLC has any tax advantage for the business versus an S corp.
Okay, great.
And Andrew, it's a very good segue too, because I've said a couple times that the attorney, at least I think, I know it's self-serving. The attorney should be the point person, your general practitioner, but that's the excellent place to segue in the accountant, right? So when we're making those calls, a lot of times sitting right at the conference table, I'll tell people, pick up the phone, call your accountant right now. Let's run this question through with your accountant, because I can see things and I know certain things, but they're the tax experts, so let's bring them in. And it's a good segue to talking about some of the team concepts that I think are important for small business.
Okay, excellent. Okay, so yeah, no, definitely you need a team, and unfortunately too many people don't do the right stuff in the beginning, and it plagues them later, especially on the accounting and bookkeeping side. But also on the entity side, a lot of times people just set up the entity and maybe pay their annual fee, uh, but assume that's all they need to do, but that's not really true.
That is not true.
So what other things do you need to do besides just set up an entity on a periodic basis?
It's a great question, Andrew, because these days, obviously you can very quickly, the internet, get an LLC or get a corporation. But if it's an S corp, it's typically a shareholder agreement that's going to define a lot of the rights of the people who own the business. And in an LLC, it's an operating agreement. And just like you could set up an LLC on the internet, you can also get an operating agreement on the internet. But you can trust me when I tell you that it is not customized. It will not interview you. It will not go through all of your hopes and dreams and worries and risk assessment and understand the personalities of the people involved. And the operating agreement often becomes a pretty complicated document, because we try and project all the good things that could happen and all the bad things that could happen and all of the control issues along the way. It becomes 20, 30, 40 pages of essentially the rules of managing your business between who controls the business and the various people who have equity interests in the business. But it's very important to develop that. And another theme that I always like to hit on is, just because if you have a 3-year-old business and you have a really good operating agreement, that operating agreement may not be right for you when you have a 7-year-old business or a 10-year-old business. We talk a lot to people about coming in and doing checkups with their attorneys and with their whole team of consultants, hopefully yearly, but at least every couple years, to manage whether or not, since we're talking about operating agreements, whether or not that operating agreement still fits the business, whether it still properly defines how that business is being managed and financed and so forth, or do you need a revision? Do you need an update to it? But I think having the concept that having a good document to start is very important, and then having the various documents grow with the business is also very important.
Okay, excellent. So, yeah, I mean, I think definitely it's an evolution, and it's important to really understand that. But you want to start things off right. So that's one of the reasons why I want to make sure we spend a little extra time on step one, because it's a lot easier to do something right than try and fix it later. And it's usually easier and cheaper. And things always go bad at like the worst timing. So if you can avoid things happening, it's way better than not preparing and doing what you need to do. So
You're very correct about that, Andrew. I unfortunately, people that come in and have a 5-year-old business and then two partners who no longer get along, I tell them that if they had spent $1,000 on an operating agreement that defined how to separate, they would have been fine. And instead, here they are 5 years later fighting with each other with no playbook, with no rules. And so therefore, there's a good chance you're going to end up in arbitration or court or some other thing that's going to be very much more expensive, rather than if you had just planned a little bit more and defined it ahead of time. You would have been able to have a better understanding of your expectations, but certainly saved money.
Okay, excellent. So, definitely having some great comments. Appreciate you guys sharing them. Willie, hey, thanks for joining again. Adele, thanks for joining. Look forward to seeing you Friday. Russ, and something else that I think is very important, and we talk about is, not all accountants are the same. Not all attorneys are the same. How do you pick? How should you pick a good attorney? Because, a lot of times, you want to build a team, you build a team, but you might build a team with the wrong people. So how should you, consider an attorney if you're going to look to hire one?
Yeah, so it is a very good question. We typically see people who make mistakes in business, and then when we ask them about the team around them, not just the lawyer, sometimes the accountant, sometimes the insurance person, when we ask them, how did you pick that person? Oh, they did my real estate closing, or their office is right on Main Street, right next to my office. And I make the analogy a lot. That's not how you would pick your doctor, right? So you would pick your doctor one of two ways. If you had a good business network, you would go to trusted people who are more experienced than you, and you would say, hey, I'm starting this business and I'm going to grow this business. Do you know a good lawyer, a good insurance broker, a good financial advisor, a good accountant? And you'd build your team that way. And if you don't have that network, then interview a few, right? Then look at people's backgrounds. Go and interview them. Most lawyers probably don't charge for initial consultation, or maybe just charge a lower amount, and interview them and see if they sound like they know what they're talking about, and this sounds like they know what they would be able to help you at the different stages of your business. But if you pick the person who's on Main Street, or the person who happened to be recommended by your real estate broker to help you with your house closing, that's not a good choice to start. It's certainly not how you would pick your doctor, and health is invaluable, but the small business that you're growing and nurturing is pretty close second. It's people's biggest assets and their livelihood, and you have to make smart decisions with it, and picking your advisors correctly is certainly one of them.
Excellent. Definitely. It's very important to do your due diligence, and building your entrepreneurial network's important. A lot of times people coming into business, have their business network, but a lot of that falls away. And, a lot of people who have had jobs don't really have much of an understanding of entrepreneurship and business on that level, but they also don't have an appreciation that they don't really understand much about it. So, you have to be wary and understand their perspective, and, what a small business perspective looks like. So yeah, I think we've covered really good things. So we took a look at step one, and that's really working on the concept of your business. And in step one, actually that's three. Step one, it's about developing your products and services, your marketing plan, your structure, and problem solving, figuring out your business, how to put it together, and what your business is going to be. So definitely, those are important, things on the legal side. So let's take a look at step two. So now you're in business, you're making some sales. You got to figure out how to get accepted by the market so you can make more sales, reaching your target market. You may have employees or you may not have employees yet. And communication is so important as well. So, if we're looking at that stage, John, what are some of the key things that you should be thinking about from a legal standpoint?
So I think that in your second step, because you're working in the business, you start to see things. And I think what you said, communication being key, I think that is a great point. So in the first step, hopefully you've connected with at least one advisor. Hopefully it's a lawyer or somebody similar who you can trust. In that second step, you're now issue spotting, right? So you're issue spotting. Is your payroll company sufficient? And all of a sudden you realize you probably need tax advice. Do you have a financial advisor? Because now you think, great, you hired some employees, but now you need a benefits plan or a retirement plan. And then you start to see some of the pitfalls of your business. You start to see this could go wrong. Customers come in, there's ice on the sidewalk. Wait a minute, have I really thought about this? Do I have the right insurance? Have I spoken to, and I say insurance broker a lot, but I always like the term risk manager better. Someone who's actually engaged in your business, that comes and sees it, that really thinks about like what types of coverage and protection you need. But I think in that second step, it's working with at least one advisor you have, issue spotting, and starting to build the team around you by seeing the good and the bad your business will face, the hurdles that you need to overcome to succeed. So I think it's really starting to see the issues so you can start to understand what kind of team you need around you.
Excellent. So definitely, you continue to build your team. Um, Three key things that I sort of identify with people in this stage is, one, you're starting to sell, and depending on the type of business you have, there may be contracts or agreements that you have to work with. You also may be starting to hire employees, and there's things that you should probably put in place and think about if you're going to hire employees. And also when you're at this stage, you need to think about liability. You mentioned insurance risk manager. What are some of the risks that need to be covered legally? So those are some of the things that I generally think about that. What are your thoughts on those?
Well, look, I think you said a key word that I think covers a lot of things. You said communicate. So if you have started right and you have someone to talk to, a lawyer that you're now connected with that you can trust, the communication. So you're starting a business. I'll give you an easy example. I had a small business that was starting. They signed a phone contract. The phone contract turned out to be a big problem, but they didn't call me and just send me over the phone contract. Turn out that the phone contract had a jurisdiction clause in Florida. So if we had a problem, we had to go to Florida to resolve it, right? And it became a big problem. And the entrepreneur learned the lesson that even a simple contract with boilerplate, ship it over to me. It's going to take me 5 minutes to look at it. We have a relationship. Maybe I don't even bill you for that call or that email to look, but I look at it and say, "Whoa, we got to be careful here because this has some clause that I don't like or a jurisdiction clause." But that communication is important. Another example, Andrew, that you just mentioned is an employee. So an entrepreneur who's now hired 3 employees and then is taking on a sales force and has 10 employees, you're reading about it. You probably know the rules. You're trying to do the right thing, but you have a discipline issue with an employee. Getting on the phone with me for 15 minutes, I'll coach you through it so you do it right, so you don't end up with a problem that is going to cost you, 10 or 100 times more if you communicate with that employee the wrong way or don't respect the employee's rights or make a mistake that's going to cause a legal issue. But the communication, the issue spotting and the communication with an advisor, I think is very key in this stage because you're really trying not to step on the mines in the minefield and get your business to that next stage. But the issue spotting and communication is the key for me.
Excellent, excellent. And one other thing that many times could come at step one, step two, or step three, is IP protection, intellectual property protection, and different people have different perspectives on how and when you should approach that. What are your thoughts on what's appropriate for when you should be thinking about and applying for protection?
So I'll take both sides of this. One very terrible thing that often happens to small businesses is a little bit of a twist on what you just asked me, and that is that they go on the internet, they find a great picture. A small vet who's starting a practice, he finds this great picture of this dog that he really likes. He puts it on his website, and it turns out it's copyrighted, and he's got a big problem because these days AI searches the internet for if you're using their copyrighted photo. And the penalties are actually very substantial for using somebody else's copyrighted photo on your business. So again, go back to what I had just said. Call up your trusted advisor and say, hey, I was thinking about using this photo. And I'd say, whoa, don't use the photo. Let's get our own photo. Go call a photographer, find a dog, get a nice picture you like, and for goodness sake, don't use somebody else's copyrighted photo. So, but to answer your question, same thing. You're developing, a logo. You start to have artwork. You're using it in commerce. You have a geographic area, and you call me and you say, hey, I really like this logo. This is what we're going to go with. It's starting to be known around, and people are connecting it with my product. So we'll get right on that. And if it's text, we're copywriting, and if it's art, we're registering it as a trademark, and we're registering it as a trademark in the geographic area that we can, which is the area of influence, the area where you're using it. And depending on how fast the business is growing, we want to stay ahead of that because you might only be selling in New York, New Jersey, and Pennsylvania. But if the business is growing really fast, we might be thinking about whether or not this could be a national, a piece of intellectual property that we need to protect. And, if the business goes really well, we might have to protect it internationally. But again, issue spotting, communication are the keys.
Excellent. But you did mention that you should probably be using it first, because many times people put the cart before the horse, and when you start your business is going to change a lot. Like my business started out as A&J Management, but I got tired of people saying, "Oh, do you manage properties?" So I was like, maybe A&J Management isn't a good name. So thankfully, I didn't trademark it. So it's important. You want to do stuff early, but you don't want to do stuff unnecessarily. So.
And you when you're dealing with your lawyer or your other advisors, you want to make sure you're not buying things you don't need. There are people that come to me and say, hey, I'm going to start a business. I want this structure, and I want this, and I want that document, I want a plan. And I say, you know what, go do this for 3 months. Make an appointment right now and come back in 3 months. Because if you sell any of these things, or if you brought in your first $5,000, fine, then let's spend the money, right? But a 22-year-old starting out, if you don't have a lot of assets, you don't necessarily need a lot of protection on day one, right? So you don't need to be sold extra products on day one. So there are times where, we take the consult and then we watch people grow. And the same thing with your intellectual property. Get it in place, refine it, get it to where you really like it, and then as the business grows, let's go protect it as we need.
Okay, excellent. So, yeah, so I mean, those are key things at stage 2. Let's take a look at step 3. This is working when you're working on your business. So, this you've got some traction, you've got some customers, you've grown, you've got some employees, even a supervisor. This is where you optimize your business. So analysis is like the key skill and implementing processes, procedures, and you have to become a professional manager. And that's a challenge for a lot of business owners. That's why most business owners never successfully arrive at step 3, because a lot of differences. So what are some of the things that you see as people are hitting this stage that would be different from the prior stage?
Well, I think on the legal side, you certainly enter new levels of sophistication. So when you're at that stage, you certainly have more employees. You have key employees. We're starting to think about non-competes. You have a sales manager. You want to make sure that they don't leave and start their own business and compete against you. So your legal documents start to become more sophisticated. Probably your financing documents start to become more sophisticated because of your needs. But I think at this stage, this is the stage where I really think it's key that now you've identified all the key people in your universe. Your lawyer, a specialty business consultant for whatever industry you're in, could be an engineer, could be a sales consultant, whatever business you're in, certainly an accountant, a financial advisor, and a risk manager. At this stage in the business, you need to be getting input from all of those different, exterior points, because your business itself is becoming more sophisticated. And the simple example I gave before about a contract, this is the stage of your business where your contracts are going to be getting more complicated, where the contracts that you're using to sell your products are going to get more complicated. You will have learned a few lessons the hard way, that you need different clauses in your contracts to protect you, cancellation clauses, termination, collection issues, all the things that entrepreneurs learn over time. We try and build them into all the documents, either on the vendor side or on the actual business side.
No, it makes a lot of sense. One thing that I think a lot of people don't realize is, or don't appreciate, is that business is totally, things that happen on the personal side are totally different than on the business side, in that there's protections on the personal side, but on the business side, generally there aren't protections. So you got to be really, really careful before you, and not get into something that you shouldn't get into, especially because a lot of people you deal with, if they write the contract, it's usually in their favor. Talk a little bit about kind of that perspective, and what to watch out for.
Yeah, so Andrew, you're 100% right. New Jersey in particular, but almost all states, a lot of the laws that protect people on the legal side are really focused on the consumer. There's a lot of regulations on door-to-door salesmen that we don't have so much anymore. There's a lot of regulations on car sales. There's a lot of regulations on financing for various things, but all as it affects an individual, as it affects a consumer. The law generally thinks that people in the commercial space are on equal footing, even though businesses can be all different sizes and have different leverage. But a lot of those protections that you would have as an individual or a homeowner, you do not have as a business owner. And when you're entering into a contract, that's an easy example. If you were an individual and you were entering into a contract, there's a lot of laws about how big the print has to be, about how many times you have to initial, about how prominent it has to be. On the commercial side, generally you're entering into a contract at your own peril. So the example I gave before, it really actually comes up quite a bit. A business owner is moving real quick. He wants to buy something. He doesn't flip the page over and read the boilerplate on the backside. There's some clauses in there, particularly a jurisdiction clause. He signs it, and as soon as we have a dispute, we have a real problem with having to go to another state or having very unfavorable conditions. Another easy example is in business. Very often, somebody will sell you something and then they want to finance it, and a very common scheme is that the company who sells it to you is not the company who finances it. So if you have a problem with that machine, this is very common in business machines that a entrepreneur might rent or lease to buy. Very often, the company that sells you the product hands it off to a financing company. The financing company collects your money, and when that product breaks 6 months later, the vendor is completely gone. You call up the financing company and say, "I'm not paying for this anymore because it broke," and they say, "Oh, you should have read that contract more carefully because the person who sold you that equipment is long gone. They said it was as is, and the finance documents all say, you have to pay us the money regardless of whether it works or it doesn't work under any circumstances." And that's actually very common in small businesses, particularly in retail businesses. We see people get hurt by that quite a bit. But I think your point is right on, Andrew, that you in the commercial world, you are assumed to be sophisticated enough to swim with the sharks, and so the law is not protecting you the same way that it would just a consumer.
Okay. Definitely. So, I think that's important because you a lot of times people get caught blindsided by that, and depending on what you sign, it could put you out of business.
It can bankrupt you. Yep.
Yeah, and personally too.
Out of business, you could be wiped out. Yes.
Yeah, and especially on loans, because people think because they have a LLC that it's limited liability, but they always have a clause that you have to give a personal guarantee to, and
on your financing and very often on your leases. So either one can hurt you if things go wrong.
Yeah, definitely. So let's take a look at step 4, because I think we're running quick. So step 4 is working on the future of your business. And actually, we're going to do step 4 and step 5 at the same time because they go together. Really work on the future. You've got your business, you've optimized it. Now you're in a place where you can, accelerate your growth. So step 4 is, just putting your growth plan in place. So you're hiring managers to lead. You have to learn how to coach them instead of managing people. You got to develop your leadership team. You got to develop, the right plan. So that's step 4. And then step 5 is scaling your business. So, when you're scaling, your goal is rapid growth. Whenever you have rapid growth, you got to manage it. A lot of businesses can go out of business just as fast by growing too fast is not growing enough. Growth takes cash. So even though you're selling more, that doesn't mean you have more cash. Usually you have less, and you have to set up your financing, and you need to put in place executives, and you really need to be able to inspire people within your organization and outside of your organization. So at these levels, you even have to be more sophisticated. So what are some of the key things that you should be thinking about legally as you're going through those things?
So this is those are key steps in the business, and I recommend when businesses get to that size and that sophistication and that level of maturity to have your team, as I've mentioned a few times, but have that team meet regularly, whatever the needs of the business. Maybe it's once every 6 months, maybe it's once a year. But take your team, your lawyer, your risk manager, your accountant, your financial planner, whatever the consultants you have. Maybe it's you take them out to lunch once every 6 months. Maybe you have them come in and meet in the boardroom and brainstorm about the business and where it's going. Because that collective group of people, it has experience where you have experience growing this one business. That collective group of business professionals has probably counseled hundreds of businesses in the same circumstances. And so that's where you're going to get the key guidance as to when to take on debt, when to take on more partners, how to expand, the perils of expanding. But that is the segue right into succession planning. So for entrepreneurs, your business that you grow and develop is very likely your largest asset. It's probably the largest asset in your family. And then we get right into, are you thinking about someday leaving this business to be run by a key employee, a group of employees? Do you want a child to come and take over the business? Or are we starting to grow the business and package the business so that someday it can be taken out, so that it could be sold, so you could take on partnerships? And I think getting into that level of sophistication at a key point in the entrepreneur's maturity and the business's maturity is key. And the team approach helps so much. Some of my clients take me up on that team approach, and the meetings, paying, sometimes people, are hesitant to say, oh, I'm paying everybody who's in that room, but you're paying them for a couple hours, and the collective wisdom can be really, really valuable in guiding you to take, steps through 4 and 5 in your business and figure out, how what you're doing right now is going to dovetail with the end game.
Okay, great. So yeah, as you grow, definitely, you need your team more, not less. And I like scheduling things because, time goes by so fast that if you don't, you just look up and, you didn't do something for like a month or two that you wish you had done. So no, that's a great point.
Especially when you're talking about succession, because it takes a long time.
Mhm.
The worst mistake you could make is to be 60 years old and say, hey, my son or daughter is going to come into the business and they're going to take over. It's a terrible mistake. You should have brought them in 5 years ago to work their way through the business, to develop relationships and skills so that they were ready to take over the business, right? So that forward-thinking planning is very important.
Definitely. So cool. So, of course, we've covered a lot. I think we could probably talk about this for, a whole bunch more hours, but, we have a time limit. We're not like the networks that we're going to just cut you off exactly at 10 o'clock. So we're going to go over a couple minutes, but, before you go, I always like to ask guests to share 3 key takeaways, because I think that, a lot of times it's hard to recall a lot of things. And, many times people can't remember more than 3 things. So, if there's 3 things that you think above anything else that people should take away and think about, that would be great. I'm going to play a short video while you're thinking of those, and then we'll come back and go through those. Hi, Andrew here, and I'm excited to announce the launch of our new book, 99 Proven Tips to Accelerate Your Masterpreneur Journey. 5 years, 33 incredible guests, hundreds of powerful business lessons, and now it's all in one place. Introducing 99 Proven Tips to Accelerate Your Masterpreneur Journey, a brand new book built from the insights, wisdom, and strategies shared by the guest experts of our podcast, Leadership Live at 8:05, Talking Small Business. Inside, You'll discover actionable tips on how to launch smarter.
So if you have an idea that you have researched and you know who your customer is and you think that you've got the experience you need, now is a perfect time to start a business. But remember, start as a side hustle first.
Grow faster.
So sales is about problem solving, not about manipulating. You have to understand the math of your business, the sales math.
Lead more effectively.
You shouldn't expect someone to be you. You have to understand and create processes to basically train people on how to handle certain situations and basically set people on the right path, right? So they can become successful within your organization.
And scale your business with confidence.
Bet on yourself and not be afraid to take risks and to know that you have within you the ability to accomplish your dreams and accomplish your goals.
Think like an entrepreneur. Now, I know there may be many entrepreneurs listening, but there may be some who aren't entrepreneurs. It's all well and good. I'm here to say entrepreneurship is not just something you do, it's a way that you think. And the characteristics of an entrepreneur's thinking are creativity, resourcefulness, courage, resilience, and passion.
This isn't theory, it's practical advice straight from entrepreneurs and thought leaders who have done it. 5 years of conversations, 33 voices of experience, and now 99 tips to accelerate your masterpreneur journey. Get your copy today. Pre-order now to reserve your signed copy. Click the button below or scan the QR code to order from www. Okay. All right. Well, welcome back. I'm here with John Ursin, talking small business. Tonight, we're talking about your legal game plan for growth. What your business needs at every stage. So we covered the 5 stages. But John, overall, what are the 3 key things that everybody should take away from tonight?
Well, I think we have to buy the book and get the 99 tips. That seems like a good start. But if I was trying to distill this down to 3 things, the first is to plan. And the way you lay out the 5 steps, I think, is a really great way to conceptualize the different stages. But the first thing I would say is plan. Draw a flow chart. Draw a flow chart of what can go right, what can go wrong, and really try and get granular into all of the possibilities and do your best to plan for that. The second is, throughout the discussion tonight, many times I mentioned having a team around you, but it's not just that you have advisors in the different areas that you need to run a business. It's that they have to be the right people, they have to be trusted, and you have to build a relationship with them. That's where the value comes, because if they don't know you and you don't know them, you're not getting the best advice as you go along. And then the last thing that I would say, the third thing, is just because you had a plan when you were at step 1 or 2 of your journey, don't think that that's your plan throughout the entire development of your business. Periodically revisit it, use the resources that you have available, and refine your plan. And Andrew said earlier, schedule it, right? Because if you don't schedule it, you get so busy with the business, you don't do it. So whether you have a specific date in the summer or you have a January 1st date where you sit down with your business plan and you refine it, and I like you to refine it with your team of advisors giving input, but periodically refine your business plan. Those are my 3 tips.
Okay, great. So yeah, definitely planning. In the Navy, they used to say proper planning prevents poor performance. And, so definitely, preparing or failing to prepare is preparing to fail. So, that's the first and foremost, but not just, your business plan, but even beyond your business plan. And legal is an important part of that. So planning is great. Having the right people, at the end of the day, your team you're either going to win or lose with your team. So making good decisions as far as your team. And, you remember, keep in mind, you're paying the money. So if you're not happy with something, it's not their fault, it's your fault because you're letting it happen. So, definitely make the tough decisions. If your team's not the team it needs to be, then you need to make some adjustments. And finally, as your business grows, things change a lot. They say that every time your business doubles, everything breaks. So you have to continually work on your plan, your strategies, and set up a consistent way that you do it, so that you're proactive rather than reactive. Because most business owners are in a reactive position, and that's not where you need to be if you're going to take advantage of opportunities and grow. So this has been great, John. Thanks again for joining me tonight and sharing your knowledge and expertise.
Thank you. Thank you very much for having me. I enjoyed it.
Excellent. And those of you who are here, we always appreciate our guests and also our audience. So thanks for your comments, questions. Definitely always value that. John, is there anything you want to share before we close out?
No, it's springtime and optimism's in the air. So I'll wish all of your audience success in business. And I think one of the last words you said is be proactive. And that fits right in with everything I think about business. Be proactive. Be proactive in your thinking and your planning. So that's a great final point.
Okay, excellent. So, if you want to connect with John, his website and his LinkedIn profile in the comments. So feel free to reach out to him as well. And I'm going to close out, but John, if you can hang out for a few minutes, that would be great. So, first off, hopefully you learned some things. I'm sure I did as well. So this was a great show, and always, a lot of times the legal side is not thought about until there's a problem. But it's good to be reminded and understand that there's things you could and should do before you have problems that can avoid problems. Each week we have a new guest and a new topic, and really excited about next week as well. Our guest is going to be John Kennedy. He's retired CEO of NJMEP. And we're going to be talking about assessment. Basically, if you have a doctor and they prescribe something for you without diagnosing it, then that's malpractice. So if you have an advisor who's telling you what you need before they diagnose what's going on, that's kind of malpractice as well. So we're going to talk about assessments, how to figure out what you need before you try, choose a solution. So hopefully you can join us next week. Looking forward to that. And then at the end of the day, always remember that the more you know, the faster and more successfully your business is going to grow.
Thank you for listening to Leadership Live at 8:05, Talking Small Business. Subscribe to our YouTube channel and to the podcast on your favorite podcast platform. Leadership Live is one of the many valuable resources provided through the Small Business Pro University, empowering business owners to learn, profit, and grow. Find out more at sbpro.u.com.